Now this, I don't know if I'm going on a tangent here, but this reminds me of I saw this Graham Elwood thing on intergenerational wealth. Did anyone see that? But talking about intergenerational wealth in this country and how basically it's very disproportionate, between um, basically, privileged people and people of color in this country. And as far as, and I think there was an example of in Boston, the average, family wealth of, uh, white people is like whatever is $250,000 for black people. It's like $8, right? So like there's this whole discrepancy in wealth. So that affects whenever you have these programs that people get this assistance. Like if you have an extended family and like you lose your job and you can't pay your rent. I mean, ultimately you move in with your parents, you move in with your brother or whatever. But if you don't have that kind of wealth in your family, it may be much more difficult to do that. And I think that's not being really being addressed at
Sure.
all, because this like the evictions are obviously going to affect people who can't move in with a relative or whatever more than it's going to affect people who are able to do that. So I think it's
Absolutely.
going to disproportionately affect people of color and people um, in when you see people out on the streets. And I wonder, um, it's not really being addressed. I think Graham Elwood's the only one I've seen who's really dealt with that at all. And he talks about the legacy of he has this the what is it ADOC, Descendants of Slavery. I forget
ADOS,
ADOS. What is it? What's the A stand for?
American Descendants of Slaves.
Okay, so he talks about that whole basically, and which didn't end in 1865. It went through Jim Crow and Reconstruction and Jim Crow, and there's this. So there hasn't been the ability of that class to amass wealth to any extent,
Hmm.
and you look at all the policies of like Republicans trying to abolish like the so-called death tax, the inheritance tax, because the idea is you can't pass. That would mean it would be harder to pass wealth from generation to generation. So it's
Right.
keeping the wealth, and obviously taxation has a lot to do with that, income as well as wealth taxes, of which we don't have, in this country really, except we have property taxes at state level. But you
Mm.
know, the fact that you have wealth concentrated. I mean, I don't think that's really being discussed at this point, but it seems to me that's really relevant because, um, when push comes to shove, the people who are going to be most affected are going to be the people who are disproportionately people of color, right?
Yeah, I would
No,
agree with that. In bad times, there'd be less safety net available there. Completely relevant what you're saying. The ability to move in with parents who happen to have an extra bedroom and some cash in the bank to buy extra groceries and all that. Yeah. Yeah, we could still have a really horrific situation coming down the road here, if all these if there isn't some kind of UBI, some kind of payments to help folks out.
And and one thing that doesn't get talked about is that what about those people? And, as a person of color, as a Hispanic person, I grew up in a family where my grandma lived with us. Like, you have several generations that live in one household.
Hmm.
What about those people?
right.
Who where they were living together, you know what I'm saying, and had to a lot of the times the reason why we all live together, one, because we like to take care of our older generation, but also it's because of financial reasons, that you're
Mm.
not able to just spread out. Not every single person can go and have an apartment or have a house, and you know what I'm saying, and so you pool your funds together in order to be able to maintain whatever housing it is that you have. So what about those people? And especially in like California, where you have a lot of immigrants, immigrant families that are there who, and they have no recourse because they can't go to anybody because they're afraid that they're going to get deported, or that one of their
Yeah.
family members is going to get deported, or they're just going to get put into one of these ICE detention centers, or like that's not something that's really talked about with this whole pandemic crisis. That everybody talks about, obviously, yes, people of color, but what about immigrants in this situation? A lot of them, they have their jobs are, they it's a daily type of funding, you know. The
Right.
same situation happens in India. Like when India locked down, it was a big deal because a lot of these people, they
Right.
make their money in the day, and if they're not able to go and travel for work or whatever it may be, then they have no money to buy food for that day, you know. And for
Yeah.
a lot of these immigrants, it's the same deal.
And I think COVID hits them harder too, right? Because it's a whole different in the white suburbs where people might have 1,000 square feet per person versus a situation like you're talking about where you've got multi-generational for financial reasons and also just more expensive in the city perhaps, right? You're talking like 100 square feet per person. People live in close proximity. As we say, multi-generational. That's a much bigger concern about catching COVID,
Right.
and going
I
through a
mean,
whole
do you see
family.
these people in the suburbs maybe who like think of themselves as progressive, with a 3,000-foot house? Are they going to be willing to take in some people who are homeless because of this? That's a real
I doubt
test.
it.
Like,
Yeah, I don't
I
think that's
doubt it too.
happening. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have like what is it, Karen and Kevin with their guns standing on the
Uh,
lawn,
was it
right?
Kevin?
Yeah.
That was his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's that it's the whole Karen and Kevin
Yeah,
thing.
right,
Like,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
KK,
not
just
that
need
their
one
names
more
are
K,
actually
right? Yeah.
or maybe they are the Karen and
Yeah, I
Kevin,
don't.
but that was just the nickname that was given to them.
And they said that they supported Black Lives Matter. Those people. They said they supported the movement. They just didn't want these people going in there.
Yeah. Well,
No.
Whatever.
that's how it always works, right? And
Yeah.
that's one of the main arguments that you get from the anti-socialists, right, or the capitalists, is they always say like, oh, well, you have this bleeding heart, right, that you want to help
Right.
all these homeless people. So then why don't you take in homeless people in your house,
Right.
or why don't you just leave your door open? Like with the whole open borders thing, how a lot of people have that big contention. It's like, well, then why don't you just bring in all these
Right.
people into your
Well, it's
house?
not in my backyard. It's like see no evil. Like I don't care how these clothes. I buy the clothes at the Gap and they're really cheap. I don't. I don't. They were made by slaves in Pakistan by children or whatever. I think because they have a sign up saying we enforce whatever something so I feel good about it now. It's okay, so I can
I'm a
still
social justice warrior, so
I'm a
I'm
social
good.
justice warrior,
Yeah.
right? But like when it comes down to it, like when these people start invading invade's the wrong word, but when they start showing up in your neighborhood saying, "Can I stay at your house?" Are you going to do that? And during the Depression, I mean, I remember that my father's generation talking about this. During the Depression, there were like hobos, right? So there were homeless people who just wandered around. They lived in rail cars, and if they showed up at your back door, they said, "Could you feed us?" And the rule was basically you gave them a hot meal. That's what you did. You
Wow.
didn't
Oh,
turn them around. And that was kind of the ethos of that time, because you figure everyone's in hard times,
right.
and they wouldn't stay there, but you would give them a hot meal, feed them, and maybe let them take a shower or whatever, and then they'd be on their way. But
Huh.
like I
See,
can
that's
kind of see that.
community. That's
I,
community
I
right
can
there.
see that. Well, actually the Depression did a lot to engender this feelings of community in this country, which the capitalist ethic is totally against. It's all personal freedom, individual rights, my gun, whatever, my money, my property. I think this will start chipping away at that edifice of um, that ideology. So we started becoming a little bit more collective minded than just individualist. So that might be a good thing,
Yeah.
the end result.